The next question is, what do you say to a friend who is a non-believer and thinks the Bible is a group of fictitious stories? It's a really common objection to Scripture. And I think the first question, since we deal with this a lot of time, and if it's a true friend, ask the person, what evidence do you have to support your claim? That's just a genuine question when anyone's sort of making a sort of general sweeping accusation towards Christianity. It's just asking for the evidence to be able to support it. Because looking at the history, looking at Scripture, look at the Old Testament first. There was the main sort of curator in the British Museum. His name is Frederick Kenyon. He's not alive anymore, but he was the curator for about 25 years, a long time. And as they were setting up the British Museum and setting up the exhibitions in there, the book that he used as an accurate understanding of figures and time and events was the Old Testament. He used the Old Testament because the archaeology, and as it continues to reveal, it is a very reliable text that points to actual people, actual dates, actual events that happened. And so we see that the Scripture, far from being fictitious, is actually grounded in reality. Then we look at the New Testament. I did as I said, I became a Christian much later in life, and when I became a Christian, I had tons of questions. And those questions happened to coincide with me going back to school and doing my undergrad. And so I majored in religion. And the one religion I wanted to really kind of dig into was Christianity. And so I was going to Columbia University in New York City, and I signed up for sort of sweeping introduction into Christianity. It was taught by Professor Robert Somerville, who's probably the leading scholar in canon law. And so I was sitting in there and I was hesitant. I was like, okay, what evidence do we have to actually prove these stories? And the class is packed with kids. And he starts walking you through and he says, listen, we're going to study this text, this New Testament text, and we're going to approach it just like we approach any historical book that we would examine in academia. And what we're going to find is this. There's more evidence to support this book than any historical book that we have. And you could just hear the oxygen almost leave the room, because people had assumed that New Testament was based on fictitious stories. And it was so far from that. And we walked through the evidence. We looked at the stories themselves. We even used texts outside of Scripture, where the local governor would write to the emperor of Rome asking questions about, hey, who are these Christians? Why do they believe what they believe? And the real question was, how do we persecute them? Because the church was highly persecuted for the first couple hundred years. And what that does, it allows us to actually use texts outside of Scripture to support Scripture itself. Now, I think the last point I would make is that there are certain stories in the Bible that we have to wrestle with. Maybe the resurrection, for example, is a fictitious story. Maybe Jesus actually didn't rise from the dead. Maybe that's just something they made up. They sort of hid the body, and they believe that sort of story, and that's how we explain Christianity. There's enormous problems with that theory. One is that if they did sort of hide the body, all they would have to do, these are people that Christians did not have a lot of power during this time. Be simple as produce the body. The leading people that were leading sort of Christ to be crucified would have for sure said, listen, we can find out where they put the body, we're going to do that. We have to explain how Christianity spread in the Roman Empire in 300 years, that it became a persecuted religion to the accepted religion of the Roman Empire. That's part of the thing we have to explain. How did that happen? Would it happen based on a lie? The theory is, yes, people are willing to die for a lie. But they're not willing to die for a lie they know is a lie. They're not willing to die. If they know it's a lie, they're not willing to die for it, but they'll die for a lie. And we have to look at the lives of the apostles. Why were these, every single book in here, all these sort of apostles, they were killed for their faith. They were persecuted. They were killed for what they believed. And we have to wrestle with that and say, what was it that they witnessed that led to such a transformation in their lives that they are willing to die for it? And so I just really challenge the question of that it is based on a fictitious story. We have so much evidence to point to otherwise. And then we also have to explain how did Christianity flourish as well.